It doesn't matter how much leather you put in the interior or how big a screen you fit to the dashboard, this thing is a workhorse. Pickups are a dying breed, or at least they are this side of the Atlantic, whether it's their size, their inefficient engines, or that feeling of what do I do with all my stuff if I've parked up and it's just left there all out in the open. But despite the fact that quite a few have fallen by the wayside in recent years, Ford, the manufacturer that killed the Fiesta not that long ago, thinks there is still life left in the European pickup market. This is the all-new Ford Ranger. Yep, as intimidating as ever, there's definitely a bit of Ford F-150 in the styling, shrunken slightly for the UK and Europe. Underneath there's an updated version of the old car's platform, which is said to make it more car-like to drive than ever. Okay, that's a horrible cliche and one we will come back to in a little bit, but on that subject, it actually does feel quite a bit more car-like up here. I bet you didn't expect digital dials or a huge 12-inch portrait touchscreen in a pickup truck, especially not one running Ford's latest Sync 4 software. And the best bit is that every version, even the entry-level ones with steel wheels, come with a screen like this of some sort. It's a real highlight actually. It's quick, it's responsive, it's easy to use. There's Apple CarPlay and Android Auto should you want those. But how it will fare being bashed about on a building site, well, that's another matter entirely, isn't it? Maybe you can get one of those full-size screen protectors, you know, the ones you get on your iPhone. But well, you're not going to drop a pickup truck, are you? So look, I'm being facetious. All jokes aside, in here, I think it just feels a little bit almost too premium. It's leather on the dashboard, there's leather on the seats, there's leather on the gear knob. You don't really expect it in a car like this. And well, it definitely beats all of its rivals, including the SsangYong Musso, which is our previous top pick in this class. It's more premium than all of those, Volkswagen Amarok accepted. Look, there's contrasting stitching on the steering wheel, on the seats, there's soft touch materials up here and here, and while that's fine if you want one car to do it all, I just don't know how it's going to fare if you're chucking in things without much care or attention. But where it does feel a little bit too premium in places, it does feel typically tough in others. Like this leather actually feels quite thick, and then you've got these rotary controllers for the air conditioning, you've got that big solid gear lever, there's another dial down here to switch the car between its high and low range, its 2 and 4-wheel drive modes. So yeah, in some ways it's like premium SUV, in other ways it's typical tough pickup. And there's a reason for that, as underneath it all, the Ranger and Amarok are the result of a Ford and Volkswagen tie-up that will see the two brands share technology and know-how across a variety of models, pickups and vans, even EVs. Now there is a brawny V6 diesel engine which is muscular, smooth and actually pretty quick, but this 4-cylinder would be good enough for most. It's definitely not as refined, but it feels nearly as strong. 1 0 to 62 takes 10.5 seconds. It's got loads of torque, 500 newton meters of torque, so yeah, it feels pretty strong, and well, my bet is it could tow some pretty hefty trailers as well. But in day-to-day use, and I am going to use that cliche once again, it does feel remarkably car-like to drive. Don't get me wrong, around town it's big, but it's no bigger than something like a Land Rover Defender or a Discovery or a Transit van. Admittedly, that bonnet is quite high and you've got that bluff front end, and looking in that rear view mirror, the back end is quite a long way away, which does make parking a little bit trickier. But well, we've got cameras. Every double cab model gets a reversing camera as standard. Otherwise though, there aren't really any surprises, good or bad. The steering doesn't offer much feel and the suspension is pretty floaty, but the trade-off is a pretty comfortable ride. You do get a little bit of fidget over particularly rippled surfaces, particularly with nothing in the back, but that's just standard pickup. Grip is good even in the 2-wheel drive setting, but with all that ground clearance and the various drive modes, you've got slippery, mud, rocks, sand, loads to choose from. There's not going to be much on the farm or the building site that this new Ranger can't tackle pretty easily. Most bizarrely, this 10-speed gearbox, it holds onto the gears longer than you might expect, which is odd considering there's so many for it to cycle through. So when you're getting up to speed, it can be a little bit noisy. The best bit is though, when you do get there, it just settles down into that 10th cog and it actually cruises really nicely. There isn't much wind or road noise at all, which is, well, just not what I expected. Now, of course, all of these opinions relate to the fairly flashy Wildtrak version, which costs the best part of 40 grand before VAT. Cheaper models are available. There's even a 2-door version with a longer load bed, a 6-speed manual gearbox and steel wheels if you really do want a no-frills workhorse. Ignoring those, most are likely to opt for this slightly more powerful 202 brake horsepower 2-litre 4-cylinder turbo diesel with a 10-speed automatic gearbox, matched either to the Tremor or Wildtrak specs like we have here. The full trim lineup and all you need to know can be found at carbuyer.co.uk. Just search Ford Ranger. But suffice it to say, this is the version we would recommend, as it just feels a little bit less, well, rugged and, well, here comes that cliche again, a little bit more car-like inside. Now, the reason that pickups grew in popularity so substantially a decade or so ago before dwindling off again more recently was that people discovered it could do the workhorse stuff during the week before effectively transforming into a family SUV at the weekend, carrying the kids around, going shopping, just doing all of those mundane tasks that big posh family SUVs do. But I mean, even now, even though they're not as cost effective to run, you can still see the appeal. I mean, I'm just over 6 foot tall. I've got enough knee room, not loads, but enough knee room and plenty of headroom. These big wide windows give me a great view out the side, and they'll be absolutely fine for kids back here. You do sit a little bit upright, but that's just the general nature of having such a fixed flat bulkhead at the back. But yeah, otherwise, no 4-zone climate control. This is not a posh family SUV after all, but you do get some vents and there's some USB slots and there's a load of pockets and bits and places to keep your odds and ends. As mentioned, you've got a choice of diesel or diesel, unless you go for the petrol Raptor. None will work wonders for your annual fuel or company car tax bill, though we've been seeing a fairly consistent 31.9 mpg against an average of 32.1 mpg. There's a rumoured pure electric version incoming, which will rival the single electric pickup currently on sale, the Maxus T90 EV. But well, for what these vehicles are used for, we can't see many flocking to electric in any great numbers. Remember that throwaway comment I made a little while ago about, well, what do I do with all my stuff when I chuck it in here and I park up and it's just all left out in the open? Well, now I look a bit silly, don't I? Or do I? Because this roller cover is a £1,600 option. It's electric when it works, but I can bet you anything it's not completely waterproof, and that to me is where an SUV comes into its own versus a pickup truck. Okay, sure, it depends on how you're going to use it. If you're throwing sand or dirt or power tools in there, then go for it. Fill this thing with Euro pallets until your heart's content. But if it's more like suitcases, like the one we've got here, well, I'm sorry, but that's where this thing just doesn't really cut it. We've used the word workhorse quite a few times in this review, and ultimately that's what this thing is. It doesn't matter how much leather you put in the interior or how big a screen you fit to the dashboard, this thing is a workhorse. And on that note, why not do some deal makers and deal breakers? This is by far and away the most technologically advanced pickup to date. You wouldn't get a screen like that in many SUVs costing similar money, and it works really well too. This is probably the most car-like truck of its type to drive. Sorry, there we go again. It doesn't feel unwieldy, either in town or out on the open road, and once you're up to speed, it feels pretty settled. And it's comfortable too, not just in terms of the ride, but also when it comes to perceived quality. But then questions remain about how durable some of the materials will prove when subjected to the rough and tumble of life on a building site. That, ultimately, is what these cars are used for. And then you'll need to take into account running costs. An electric car or van or even a plug-in hybrid will be more affordable for business buyers, and that's before you consider fuel economy, which, as we discovered, isn't exactly stellar. Some of those deal breakers that I mentioned just then, well, they put a bit of a downer on this new Ford Ranger, and well, that really isn't our intention. You see, this is by some margin the easiest, and I've said it 15 times, the most car-like pickup to live with. The tech is slick, the driving experience is pretty well polished as well. It's punchy, it's practical, it's comfortable. But at this price, in these kind of trims, it is expensive. And well, that just detracts from what we think a pickup should be. Ultimately, we're going to throw it back to you. And we don't do that very often. If you like this kind of car and it works with your lifestyle, then ultimately, I don't think you'll be disappointed. If you like this video, then why not watch our review of another posh do-it-all off-roader, the Land Rover Defender, or our SUVs playlist. Thanks for watching.